because I tried things that in retrospect, had I have known what I was actually doing, I never would have tried that. Yes, I know you don't know what you're doing, but it's okay. We're here to help you along the way. Pippi is a kid who lives on her own, enjoying life, adventuring in life, and fearless. And I think through that character, I realized like, whoa, that's actually a way you can go through life.
The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Our guest today hardly needs an introduction. John Strelecky is a #1 best-selling author whose books, which include The Café, On the Edge of the World, Life Safari, and The Big Five for Life, have sold over 11 million copies in 45 languages, inspiring readers across the globe to rethink what it means to live with purpose. But before he became an author, he was, like all of us, a reader. And the 10 books that inspired him the most on his life journey tell us a lot about the adventurer, the thinker, and the storyteller behind the public figure who's been honoured alongside Oprah Winfrey, Tony Robbins, and Deepak Chopra as one of the 100 most inspirational thought leaders in the field of leadership and personal development today. John Strelecky, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's so good to be here. I love this format, by the way, so congratulations on picking something so special and so unique. I was just blown away when I was listening to other people's interviews about how profoundly insightful this concept is. I learned so much about who they are, what motivates them, what inspires them. So yeah, I'm so looking forward to this discussion. So thank you for coming up with a format.
Thank you. Bit like your download. That's how it came through to me as well.
Love that.
Before we start, tell me, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, Strelecky.
Strelecky. Okay, good. All right. So just tell us a little bit about your relationship with books. Not your own, ones you've read.
Yeah, I mean, I was a reader when I was a kid. My mom would take us to the library, and during the summertime, we would literally get a giant stack of 15 or 20. I don't remember what the max was you could take, but 15 or 20 books. And I would bring them home and just spend hours and hours reading. So when I wasn't outside playing, I was reading. And what I love about great books is that they transport you somewhere else. And so it's equally surprising to you when you're reading a great book that you're not in a submarine 20,000 leagues under the sea as that you are in your bedroom as a kid, right? And it's something that still transports me. I love reading great writing because of those reasons.
Yeah. So what criteria did you use, to distill your list down to just 10?
Yeah, so I use the criteria of what books inspired me. And so not necessarily books that were spiritually transformative, but just more in the concept of inspiring. And what I loved about what came out for me because I did that is the very first book that popped on my list was one that was from my childhood. And as I was thinking through the other ones on my list, there were some other ones that I didn't add on there, but they all had a similar theme, which we'll jump into when we start talking about this first book. But Sandie, they are so tied to who I am as a human being. And I think that's why I was so excited to have this conversation and why I love this concept so much. I saw the way that who I connected to as a reader, as a child, was connecting me to the essence of who I was at my core, at my soul, at my spirit. And I think that's just so profoundly powerful.
It is, and people don't realize it. Yeah. I mean, it's there because it's fairly obvious and it's showing itself in the choices that you're making to read, but you don't discover it until much later.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because I have an exercise that I take people through when they're going through the process of trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do with their life. And one of the ones is actually asking them, what were your favorite books as a kid and why? And who were the heroes in that book? Because what I've discovered is that those books that connected with us in that way, that again was like, that's who we wanted to become. Those were the values and the attributes that we admired. And that's why we were drawn to those characters, whoever they were.
Yeah, that's our soul talking to us, isn't it? Giving us those numbers.
Yeah. At some point in our conversations, I'm sure we'll talk about something I call the cosmic algorithm of the universe. And I think that's a big piece of it, is the fact that there are these little indicators and clues and guideposts along the way. And you're 100% right, like what we're drawn to as a child. And it's a little bit sad to me. I was actually having a conversation last night because I saw this statistic that only 2% of parents are reading with their children these days. And that's so sad. A, because it's an awesome bonding experience, and B, because that is how you introduce kids to these other realms of reality that they can enter through the amazing power of books.
And these days, if you don't get them young, the phones get them, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, for sure. And the brain's response to that is different. The instant dopamine fix of a short little video is very different from the adventure that you go on as a reader, where you are co-creating visually and intellectually what's happening in the scene. Sure, the author paints a picture for you, but the rest of that you're filling in. And the emotions that you experience are genuinely your emotions because you're responding to the written word. So yeah, it's a very different experience. And I just hope that it cycles back, that because I one of the greatest experiences of my life was teaching my daughter to read by reading with her every night. And she is a voracious reader to this day.
That's wonderful to hear. So the first book on your list is Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lindgren, published in 1945. Tell me about the impact this had on you.
So for anyone who's read the story, this will 100% make sense. If you haven't read the story, Pippi is she's a kid who lives on her own in a house that is her own. And she's got this very bizarre, weird backstory. And she has a treasure chest of gold coins. And she meets these two neighbor kids. And she sort of helps them realize that life can be a great big adventure. And I love her fearlessness. I think as a kid, I was more shy and a little more hesitant. I was one of the youngest kids in my class. My parents started me at school younger than I could have been. And so I was a little bit more kind of reticent than I was the leader of the group. And you see in this Pippi character just someone who is out there enjoying life, adventuring in life, and fearless. And I think through that character, I realized, like, whoa, that's actually a way you can go through life. And so, and also the writing is funny. Like I remember as a kid laughing out loud. And I think if you can write something that makes someone laugh out loud, that is such a tremendous accomplishment. Because again, think of all the different pieces that have to happen to make that occur. Yeah. You have to be so immersed in the world that it feels as real as everything else feels, and to create that reaction. So yeah, it was very inspiring to me. And again, this is one where I looked back and I was like, oh, who am I at my core? I'm an adventurer. And that's why that story resonated with me. And I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be courageous. And I love helping people. Like I now that I'm an adult and I have the capacity, I'm always looking out for the one who is struggling. I'm looking out for the one who's maybe the little person in the group who doesn't have the confidence or physically stature small, because I remember being like that. And that's really the essence of what Pippi brought to the table too.
Have you ever gone back and read it as an adult?
I have. Yeah, I went back a couple of years ago and read it. And while it didn't have the same 100% magic that it did for me when I was a child, it's still a very funny, well-written children's book. And again, talk about a testament to good writing. You're talking about a book that was written 80 years ago, and it still stands up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great reminder that courage and humor aren't just for kids, They're survival skills for all of us.
Yeah. And I would say one of the things that I would encourage people, if you're listening to this, looking for both inspiration for your own book list and the rest of that, is go back and read the books that you read as a kid, because it actually transports you back to the human that you were then. And a lot of times you don't have so many layers and filters of I can't do this, I shouldn't do this, I have to do this. Because when you're a child, you have this innocence about you, the world is a bit more your oyster. And I've found that inspiring people to go back and read those books connects them with a piece of their soul that they feel they've lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Book number 2 is a book that consistently, over the 5 years we've been doing this, comes up in the top 20 books of all time, all-time recommendations. Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach, published in 1977. Now, this book had a big influence on you.
Profound, actually. So I discovered this book. My sister, when I was at a low point in my life in my early 20s, mid-20s, gave me Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is probably his most sold book. And I read that book and then was drawn to find something else by him and came across Illusions. And I don't know, Sandie, there's just something about this book and the simplicity of the lifestyle that he describes, and just a calmness about it. And also, I think there's a little bit where you're like, I don't know if this really happened or not. Like it's so well written in terms of towing that line that it keeps you guessing, and you feel like you're getting a glimpse into a reality that you know is possible, but you don't quite know how to access yourself through the Don Shimoda character. And so, yeah, I go back to this book often, like every year. And what I love about great books that you go back to often is how they change. You know, you're like, wait, I don't remember that part in the book the last time I read it, or any time before when I read it. And it's because as we evolve and we're at different places in our life, suddenly there's one line or one particular moment that catches you in a way that you've never been caught before. And I find that with that book.
Yeah, you've got to be ready for them. And the interesting thing is, your soul knows when you're ready, because I'm sure all these stories we hear of books falling off shelves at our feet, you know, that's our soul pushing.
Yes. I think that books have, I don't think I know, books have an energy all their own. I mean, certainly, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at length, but the way in which my stories have flown, kind of come through, not a kind of, they have completely flown through me, but the number of times I've had readers contact me and I say, how did you find the book? And they say, well, I was walking through the bookstore and it fell off the shelf in front of me. Or I was walking through the bookstore and I picked it up and then I just couldn't put it down. And then they go on to tell you how much it changed their life. And you know that the book found them. Like, they didn't actually find the book, but the book found them. And I've been the recipient of that same beautiful energy from books many, many times in my life. And so, yeah, I definitely think that it has an energy entirely its own and it's calling to you when it's the right time.
Yeah, it's those book elves. Book 3, Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe, 1971. Now, this is quite different than the others.
Yeah. So in general, my reading preference is in stories. It's the way that I write. It's what I loved to read as a kid. When I was going through school, I struggled through the textbooks, but then I would get to the one purple page, which told a story, which illustrated everything else that the 9-10 pages before that were trying to explain. And it was only through the stories that I actually understood stuff. So that is by far my preference. This book is very different, but it is a bit of a story in that it explains his personal journey going through the experience of discovering hemisync and what he was going through in his life before that, and then his adventures as he was out there exploring other realms through the adjusted consciousness that he experienced because of this technology that he discovered, where he was balancing sounds on different sides of his brain, basically.
Yeah, it's such an amazing story, and I think he was the first one.
He was. Yeah. He owned radio stations, if I remember correctly, and so he was very in tune with the engineering of it and the world of sound. And then I believe, very much like we were talking about, he got a download from the universe, a download from the other side of reality. And he was constantly in play of trying to figure out what that means. And he was very courageous. He was very adventurous in his approach to these things. And
yeah, that kind of ridicule at that time.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Now we don't think about that stuff, right? I think society is much more open to it. But back then, yeah, totally different story. So he's actually written 3 books, and all 3 of them follow his journey, but that's the first one in the series.
Book number 4, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose, Eckhart Tolle, 2005. Again, consistently in the top 20. Yeah,
and for all the right reasons. It's, this is a different story because by 2005, there was a lot of content out there about spirituality and about discovering what your purpose is. And I just felt that he absolutely hit the nail on the head with this. And again, it's not my type of book. So when an author writes a book that is not my preferred genre and I still love it, then I feel like, wow, they have just hit something that is so special. Because of course, someone who likes nonfiction is going to be drawn to that. But I 100% was. And I don't know if it's still as popular in terms of sales, but I think it's a book that will literally be read by people 100 years from now, and they will be finding just as much in it as they did when it first came out.
Yeah, I agree with that. The next one,
like my reaction would be like, it's just a lot of truths. I don't know what your experience was with it.
Yeah, it's yeah, they're the things that always get me. It's like the 4 agreements. Mm-hmm. You read something like that, and immediately you just know it. So you have to love it because, well, that's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's what's cool about it, not just that book, but all the books that you connect to, that I connect to, is that it's someone else experiencing a moment of truth, and then we find a connection to that truth. Either we also have thought that but haven't articulated in words, or we've sensed it but haven't even been able to figure out what that sense meant, and then we read it and we're like, yes, that's what I was sensing.
Yeah. Yeah. Your fifth book, now that's out of left field. It's not one that I've ever heard of. And I think you say yourself that this is a book that might not work for some people. Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls, published in 1961. There has to be a story behind this book.
Yeah, for sure. I think the reason that I love it so much and why I find it inspiring is it is a story. And like I said, I like stories as my preferred reading choice. And it's a story of a little boy who has a dream, and it's the fulfillment of that dream, but it's wrapped in the context of real humanity and real emotions. I don't know a single person who could get through this book and not cry at the end, because it's a very emotional story about love. And it's a little boy who loves his two dogs. He saves and saves and saves and works to be able to buy these two dogs. And then I don't want to spoil the story, but as he loves these dogs and as he goes through his life, it's just incredibly powerful storytelling. And I had read it many, many years ago when I was younger. And then towards the very end of the phase where I was reading with my daughter, we read it together and we would alternate pages and we were both crying. It was just such, again, beautiful storytelling. And what I love about that is that a book can transport you, like I was describing before, but also it's inspiring to me as someone who creates content to be reminded of what great content looks like and feels like. And I think as writers, we owe it to our readers to deliver the very best version of whatever story we're trying to create. And this book, to me, is something that clearly went through multiple rounds of great editing, great intuitive thinking on the part of the writer until they came to something that is, I believe, as close to perfection as you'll ever find for great writing.
You know, I never heard of it, so I looked it up and I read that it was first published by Doubleday after appearing as a serialized story in the Saturday Evening Post. Now, of course, that's how Dickens started, you know, his serialized stories. We just don't do that anymore, and that's such a shame.
Yeah, it used to be the means by which authors could make a living because they would be paid to write, basically, as opposed to having to complete an entire book. And even that is so interesting to me, to think that as an author, you're writing as you go, and then you can't go back and pre-edit. So you really have to be in this beautiful state of flow and trust and co-collaboration with the universe, because you can't go back and fix or change something in chapter 2 because it's already out there in the world. And amazing that these stories were written in that format and are so beautiful and so powerful. And it's a period piece, so I set everyone's expectations that, you know, if you're going to find something that was happening in the rural mountains of Tennessee in the 1870s or 1930s, whenever the story, I think it's in the early 1900s when the story takes place, then might not be your type of reading. But if you can immerse yourself in a period piece and understand that was the way the world was, again, beautiful writing.
Book number 6, The Celestine Prophecy, James Redfield, 1993. Tell me about how this one came into your life.
Yeah, so I got this one the way I got a lot of books at that phase of my life. There's a little bookstore where I lived called the Spiral Circle, and it was very unusual compared to every other bookstore. There was a lot of incense there. There was a lot of crystals there. And there was a lot of tremendous wisdom there, too. The owner was this incredible human being where you would walk in. She was somewhere between 80 and infinity age-wise. And when you walked in, she just had this tremendous presence, probably one of the most intuitive people that I've ever come across. And she would look at you and she'd be like, I've got the perfect book for you. And then she would walk to a shelf and pull something off as if she had been planning for you to come all day, and hands you the book, and inevitably you'd read the book and it was the perfect book for wherever you were at and what you were curious about or what you were struggling with. And so this is a book that she had recommended to me. And I think what I loved about it and what was inspiring to me is that it's a book about life, and it's a book about the other realms that exist, but it's told in a way that is action thriller. It's actually a very different style compared to nonfiction. It is a story. It's got great wisdom, but it's told in a way that is a page turner. And so I thought that was super inspiring to think that you could, again, because I'm wired that way, that's the type of books I prefer. And so to realize that you could convey wisdom about life and about the very bigger pictures in life through a story as opposed to just nonfiction, it was right in the sweet spot, just like Illusions is for me, where you get great wisdom and you get entertained at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting how these books come along. It was Mutant Message from Down Under.
Yeah,
You know,
great book.
it was some kind of thing, and they impart incredible wisdom, and we don't know whether they're true or not, but they cross into the mainstream.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if Redfield's book is still popular. I haven't gone back and read that one in the last, I don't know, 20 years. So I don't know if I would find it equally as good today, but at the time it was super powerful for me.
Well, I'll let you into a secret, you know, because we're doing no BS book clubs on the ground now.
Okay.
And I run a group in my area. This is the starter book
Oh, love that.
because it opens people's minds in an easy way to energy. Yeah, and some concepts they may not have thought about. But yeah, it's a brilliant starter book.
Yeah, I love that term too, because we're all in different phases of this adventure of figuring stuff out. And the very first step is to start asking some of what in retrospect down the line will look and feel maybe like more basic questions, but they're very core to the experience of being human. And I think before you can delve into someone like Robert Monroe, it's important to have a start. And yeah, I think this Celestine Prophecy is a great start book for that, as is Illusions in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. So book number 7, that's a whole other kind of book. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, published in 1946. And again, this turns up frequently.
Yeah, it's this is, again, I think a book that 100 years from now, people will still be reading and getting every bit as much out of as someone does today. Certainly, it's unbelievably powerful because it's one man's actual life story and the things that he dealt with, put it on in a situational frame that is so powerful and so like incredible that he was able to survive. And the fact that not only did he survive, but he was able to tap into the spiritual and intellectual side of himself in the midst of the horrors that he was going through, to discover these realities, which then became things that have helped people for generations since. And one of the most powerful things I pulled from this book, he was talking about things in the context of the concentration camp experience and what it was that caused some people to give up and what enabled some people to survive. What I pulled from that book, not only the amazing story that was his story, but was the practical application of that knowledge to our everyday lives. So we are not going through anything even remotely close to what he was living in. That said, the same aha moments that he talks about. So what is it that keeps people from surviving in the camps? They got so depressed about their situation, they got so beaten down by life that they could not project a time in their minds when they would be out of that situation. And so they couldn't envision something that was better. And I think a lot of people today, again, not nearly 1/10 of the situation, but they are struggling with that same situation. They can't see themselves getting out of where they're at to something better. And the second thing is, he said that if people had known it was going to be for 5 years, he thought like people would have been able to last and make it. But it was the undefined timeline that caused so many people to give up hope. And to me, that's also a great life lesson, that when we allow ourselves to say, I'm exiting this situation, or I'm making this change on this date by this time, that we can apply this wisdom that he had to suffer through to learn into our lives and make our lives better as well. So yeah, I love that book. I've gone back and read that one many, many times. That again is one that you'll find it changes because you've changed.
Yeah, yeah. What I took from it was find your why.
Mm-hmm.
If you know your why, you can do anything if you know why you're doing it. And I think that's very true in your book.
100%. Yeah. Waking up every morning with something that is not only motivating to get you out of bed, so that can be something where you're driven to move away from. So one of the big epiphanies I had was, are you running towards or running away from? And running away from can be a big motivator, but at some point it's not enough. It's not enough to get you excited about life. It can be enough to get you free of a bad situation. The question is, though, once you've cleared the danger zone, where are you running towards? And ideally, you can do both at the same time. So instead of running away from the thing you don't like, getting to flat ground, and then figuring out where you want to run towards, ideally you figure out, I want to run towards this, and you just head in that direction. And that clears you out of the danger zone.
Yeah, well, when you're running away, you're going to run out of steam, aren't you? at some point.
Exactly. You're constantly looking behind you, and therefore, in the cosmic algorithm, your energy, your resources are directed still on some level at this thing that you're trying to leave. And I've discovered for myself that it's just the algorithm is set up in a way that if you start directing it towards the thing that you want, then not only do you get away from the thing that you don't want, but it rapidly accelerates your progress towards what you actually do want. So it's the faster path.
Yeah, yeah. And your next book touches on those topics. This is the first time we've ever had an NLP book, and I'm so glad that you did it. I think those books, I mean, I studied with Bandler, and I think those books are just amazing if you want to understand yourself and you want to understand other people. So I'm really pleased that you're the first person to put to our library. NLP, The New Technology of Achievement by Steve Andreas and Charles Faulkner, published in 1994.
Yeah, so for me, and I think maybe this was just the way that I approached the list, was what were the books that were transformative for me as I'm going through the human experience? And I think that it is very easy to get aware that this is part of the experience. So the human part and the daily reality is just part of what's going on. We just talked about the cosmic algorithm. There's other realities, there are other planes of existence. If I'm not careful, Sandie, what I find is I'm so busy getting curious about the other planes of existence, I'm forgetting the fact that I'm in the middle of one of the greatest experiences any life form could ever have, which is the human experience here on planet Earth. And so it'd be a little bit like if you're in the movie industry and you know all the infrastructure and ways in which a movie is made, and it's very hard for you to just watch and appreciate a movie because you're like, oh, here we are at the kiss of death. Here we are at the the low point of the character. Here we are at the next phase of the hero's journey. And, oh, I know how they shot that scene. That's a left camera motion with a 3-camera shoot. And so you start dissecting the reality of the situation as opposed to just appreciating it. And so for me, I think it's really useful to just step back and be appreciative and grateful that I get to go through the human experience and marvel at it for what it is without having to understand and think about all the time what's actually creating this version of reality that I'm in. And a tiny little piece of that, but a really important one, is NLP. And when I was growing up, I had no concept that the words I used were as powerful if I just switched and tweaked them a little bit, both in the way that I felt and the way that people responded to me or to my message. And so it's if you're struggling with depression, if you're struggling with lack of self-worth, understanding NLP and the language you might be using to create the unhappiness that you're feeling is a life-changing moment.
Yeah. Very true.
I don't know for yourself, when did you first hear about these concepts and how did you apply them in your life?
Sorry, are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
Back in the late 80s, I first came across NLP. I was writing a book and my editor said to me, oh, I want you to put something in about NLP, which I'd never heard of. And I've always been fascinated by the psychology of human nature. Well, the minute I did some research, that was it. I was hooked. I had to know a lot more. I had to get trained in it, even though I never wanted to practice. I wanted to understand it. Yeah. And I just think it's, seems to have gone out of fashion a bit, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, if someone's listening and they aren't familiar with NLP, which seems surprising given the type of folks who are probably drawn to your channel, but the super basic example that I use all the time is when someone says, I have to go to work today. And the change is, I choose to go to work today. And energetically, when you say those two things out loud and you just feel, ask yourself, how do I feel when I say those? It's so different. And you realize that actually I am choosing. Like, I don't have to do this. I'm choosing to do this. And then I love that the have word is the one of the most powerful ones of making switches to in the world of NLP. Oh, I have to pick up my kids today. Well, no, you get to pick up your kids today. Like, it's not a have to. It's a great gift that you get to go to the school and pick them up and see them so excited about their day. And so those little reframes in life, maybe this is why I love all the books that I've described, is because you pick up little tidbits that when you apply them to your human experience, it changes the look, the feel, the energy of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. So book number 9, The Hidden Messages in Water, Masaru Emoto. I love the diversity of your book.
I'm wired a little weird.
In 2004.
Yeah, so this one, again, was given to me at that same little bookstore that I was telling you about. I walked in one day and she said, I've got the perfect book for you. And I remember I was reading it, and it's a very powerful book because it talks about this scientist in Japan who is curious about the energetic principles of water and the way in which different environments would impact that energy. And so he would do double-blind experiments where he would tape an envelope with something inside the envelope around a bottle of water, and they would freeze it, and then he would look at the crystalline structure of the water under an electron microscope. And he didn't know what was in the envelope, so he didn't know what the words were. And what he discovered was that the words in the envelope had a dramatic impact on the crystalline structure of the water. Words like love and gratitude would have beautiful crystals. Words like hate would have very distorted crystals, very non-aligned, non-integrated with the other crystals. And so, and then he talks about sound. He was curious, did sound have an impact? And sure enough, sound had a dramatic impact. And so I'm reading this book, Sandie, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And I get to about page 75, and then the big aha moment for me happens because about page 75, they say, oh, and by the way, your body is composed of about 70% water. And so that was just like, wait a minute. Like everything in my space is impacting me at a deep cellular energetic level. And I can control that. I can choose what posters I have or what pictures I have up in my house, in my apartment, back when I was living in an apartment, in my workspace. I can control a lot of those variables so that the energy that I feel is the energy of my choosing. And so as a very tiny example of this, when my daughter was 4.5, took her to go see the world. So we backpacked around the world for a year. And because I wanted her to realize like how much of an incredible planet this is and how lucky and fortunate we were to be born in the spot that we were, which gave us a passport, which opened up the world. And so we took a lot of pictures, as you can imagine. And then when we came back, the pictures just had an energy that was almost nothing. They were on my phone, but unless you looked at them. And so I printed out 400 of the best ones and I put them all over the house. And so no matter where we were walking, you would see these amazing pictures and bring back these great memories. And it changed the feel of the house completely. And so I got this entire idea from this book. So yeah, it's high on my recommended reading list.
And it's interesting, we're beginning to learn so much more about water now.
Yes. Yeah. So again, we think of ourselves as solid entities, and yet we know that that's not true. We break ourselves down. A cellular level is not by far the lowest level. The energetic level would be the low level, but at a cellular level, mostly your cells are just sitting in water. Like it's a surrounding structure that is filled with water. And so knowing that that water is being impacted by the energies around you gives you a chance to change the game and change your human experience.
Yeah. So book number 10, The Café on the Edge of the World by John Strelecky, published in 2003.
Yeah, so I put this one on the list and I put in my description. I'm not putting this on the list because my name is on it, but because of the way it came about and what that taught me and how that inspired me. And so I left everything behind in my early 30s because I was feeling unfulfilled with life and just asking myself, is this all there is? Like, this can't be it. This can't be all there is to the human experience. And by then I'd been reading a lot of self-help books, a lot of spiritual books. I had strong glimpses that there was more. But in my heart of hearts, I was an adventurer that was not being adventurous. I was an adventurer when I was a kid, and now here I am as an adult and just sort of doing the same thing every day, the same day in, day out. So I left everything behind, backpacked around the world, and came back, and I had something very profound happen to me, and that something inside of me said, sit down and type. And I don't remember if it was an actual voice that I heard or if it was a thought that was in my mind, but it was very powerful and very clear. And having spent the year backpacking around the world where you don't understand cultures, you don't speak the languages in the countries you're traveling, you very much learn to tap into your intuition and to trust that intuition. And so when this voice said, sit down and start typing, I literally just said, okay, good idea. And so I had no plans to be an author. I had no training to do this. But I sat down, and over the course of 21 days, something very profound happened to me. I would sit down and I would see the characters and I would hear them talking and I would see the scenes. And in reality, Sandie, as I'm at the stage I'm at now, I believe that I was actually looking at a story that already existed. So I was one of probably many potential souls who were going to be the author of that story. And I had to demonstrate that I was worthy or connected to the material. And so by going off and backpacking around the world and following my dreams, I opened up the possibility that I would get to be the one who was connected with this story. And so for 21 days, I sat down and typed. I didn't think about what I was going to type. I didn't pre-read what I had typed the days before. I just typed. And for everyone who reads The Café on the Edge of the Worlds, what was on what is in the book is basically what was on those pages after the 21 days. And that launched my life and my career in an entirely different direction. And so the reason it's on my list is because I think that was the most profound and powerful example to me of just how much is existing in the cosmic algorithm that is the collective consciousness that is available to us. And whether you're going to use it as a personal download, like how do I make it through today, or whether you're going to use it as a way to create art in some capacity, whether that's doing an Instagram post, or whether that is doing a book, or whether that is painting a painting or doing music, that we have the ability to tap into so much more than just our brain and our own knowledge. The trick is, can we open up that channel and get comfortable with what that channel being opened feels like and trusting that process? So it was massively transformative for me on countless levels. And that's why I put it on the list, is because it was the first time, like I said, I really realized just how much is out there if we allow ourselves to tap into it. We are not alone. That's the huge takeaway.
You know, we allow everyone to put one of their own books on their list because just writing a book is a transformative experience, let alone writing a book like this, which is, you know, the same kind of thing on steroids, really.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing for me in terms of being an author is that once I had that as my opening experience, I've just used that same methodology. So I wrote a little book called Life Safari that is set in Africa. And the process for writing that book, I had the house all to myself for 10 days. And so I just had this inspirational thought. And Sandie, I just sat down. It was flowing through me so fast. I could not keep up with the dialogue, you know? And I don't know where that exists. Is that existing? The main character is a very wise African woman named Mama Gombe. And is Mama Gombe existing on a different plane of consciousness? Is she actually in Africa in 1850? And that's who I'm tapping into? I don't know. And it almost doesn't matter. It's just trusting the process and then seeing the reaction of people. And initially, I think the reason you write is for yourself. Like, I'm the first person who's supposed to read all my books. The life lessons in there are things that I've been struggling with. And I find answers through the writing process that I can't seem to find anywhere else. But it's a really interesting and profound experience. And I thought at the start, because I didn't know any better, that maybe this is very bizarre and unusual and weird. But I've encountered so many other authors. This is exactly what they describe as the writing process. And so I don't think it's unique at all. I think it's available to every single person.
You know, you talked about the bookseller, the lady with the incredible bookstore.
Yeah.
And that sounds like one of your stories. But, you know, you speak all over the world. You're an inspirational speaker, internationally known. Did you know that someone has just brought a book out with exactly that kind of story about somebody? I think it's one of the Japanese writers who's written a book about a man who runs a bookshop and knows exactly which books. So is it you that has put the thought out there into the universe by maybe sharing this in one of your, speaking engagements? Or has it been out there waiting for you and someone else to bring it into different forms?
Yeah, my take is, and this goes to a really deep, beautiful question, which is, what is the point of this whole thing? Like, what is the point of the human experience? What is the point of humanity existing, the planet existing? Why? In the grand cosmos, like we're a tiny little blip. We're one speck of sand on the giant beach of the universe. And so why does it matter? And what is the point of it all? And the answer that I've come to as I've thought about this is that each time we have an epiphany, each time we have a creative flash of insight, or we learn something about ourselves or about being a great parent or how to run a company better by treating your employees really good, anytime we have an epiphany, that epiphany enters the cosmic algorithm and the giant database of all knowledge. And so this collective consciousness of knowledge is available for anyone to tap into. And so, yeah, maybe this person was tapping into something that I experienced and was profoundly impacted by. Like, oh, how about this? There's someone who you can walk into their bookstore and they know intuitively what would be the perfect book for you. And so that entered because I experienced it and then somebody else tapped into it. Or maybe this has been going on for 10,000 years as long as there's been bookstores. And the person that I was interacting with was another generation of those. Like maybe there's always been that type of person who existed. And that was a role that they've chosen to play in the human experience for the betterment of all of us. I don't know.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? You know, looking at your 10 best list, it's very clear that while the books are very different, they're all pointing in the same direction, you know, towards greater awareness, purpose, possibility, you know, waking up a little more, expanding into life rather than shrinking from it, which of course is the very core of the message that the Café on the end of the world is teaching us.
Yeah, I'll tell you a very funny thing too, in terms of like, here's a good example, and can you learn from that example? When the story had flowed through me for the Café on the Edge of the World, and I didn't know what to do with it, it felt like a book, and so I went to my bookshelf and pulled Illusions off the shelf. And I said, how big is this book? And I literally took a ruler out of my desk and I measured Illusions, and it was 7¼ inches tall. And I said, if I turn this into a book, it's going to be 7¼ inches tall. And I said, how wide is this? And I think it was 4¼ inches wide. I said, my book is going to be 4¼ inches wide. And I think this is a great life lesson that I then have applied ongoing, in that if you don't know what to do, find something that has inspired you and imitate it to the degree that you want to imitate it while you're adding your own flavor. And that is a great way to launch you in terms of whatever your dream is. Because very often we get caught in the, well, I don't know how to do this. And the how is the barrier that often holds us back from making progress. But when you get past that by finding a good example, like, it just opens up the possibilities.
Yeah, well, that also opens up another question. Was it the fact that you're looking at this incredible book that, you know, did amazingly well, and you're so wanting yours to mirror it in some way that you've tapped into the energy and it becomes this incredible success?
Yeah, we talked about that. One of the elements that I love about the book Illusions is you don't know for sure, did it happen or did it not happen? And so many readers come up and ask the same thing about the Café. Like, is this 100% true? And so to me, that's the great validation and the great thank you that I can give to Richard Bach of thank you for opening up my mind to the fact that this is the way a story can be told.
Yeah. You've written 2 more Café books.
Yeah,
so how are they different?
So the stories in the Café flow. And so it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. They aren't all out in every language. And so not everyone, depending on where you're listening here, excuse me, is going to have a chance to read them as they are. But in much the same way as I wrote the first one, there comes a time, or there has come a time in the writing experience where either I feel like I've got nothing more to say and therefore I'm not going to work on another book, or something starts to form inside of me. And my process for that is really interesting. I will let it form over the course of about 2 months, and I will just start taking notes. I keep all the notes in a file. And then at the end of about the 2 months, it's pretty consistent. Something inside of me says it's time. And I will go back through and read all of my notes that I collected over the 2 months. And then I will sit down on day 1, and I usually go to a park close to my house, and I just start writing. And the story, like I said, the minute I open to that first page of my document and I start seeing the scenes and I start hearing the characters, and the story just goes and goes. So I've written 4 books in the Café series, not because that was a master plan of some sort, but 4 times I've had this feeling like there's something to be said.
And you self-published the first one, and then it did so well that it got picked up by a mainstream publisher. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right now that little book is in 45 languages around the world. And at the start, I didn't know what I was doing. I literally have made every single mistake you can make in the publishing world. I have signed horrible contracts. I have tried things that didn't work out at all. But I think that's one of the things about life, that if you allow yourself to, you can mirror your Pippi Longstocking, the energy of Pippi Longstocking. Pippi was fearless. Pippi would try things without knowing if they were going to work. And thank goodness that when I was entering the world of authoring, I didn't know what I was doing, because I tried things that in retrospect, had I have known what I was actually doing, I never would have tried that. And it turned out to be a really good thing. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story about this. So the story flows through me over the course of 21 days, and I don't know what to do with it. It looks like a book. It feels like a book. So I think, okay, like I should try and figure out how to turn this into a book. And then my mind mentally jumps ahead, Sandie, and says, well, if you actually turn it into a book, the way to get people to know about it is to do some sort of interviews or press or publicity. And so I called the editor of a magazine and I said, hey, my name's John Strelecky and I've written this book and I was wondering if you guys would do a piece about it or a review about it. And the person said, well, we don't really do that kind of thing. But I kept talking to her and eventually I think I just wore her down. And she said, okay, send me the book. And here's what I mean, Sandie, by being so completely amateurish. I didn't have a book. I had a manuscript. Like you would never do that. Not in 1,000 years would you send a manuscript to someone. But I did. And so I printed it all out on my little inkjet printer. I sent it off to her. And up until that time, people who knew what I was going through were like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on with you over these 21 days? And I said, I don't know. But I think that if even one person reads this and it in some way helps them, the whole thing will have been worth it. Like, that's the only way I can put this in perspective. And so I send this off to this person, this editor of a magazine, and I know that it's arrived because I sent it in a way that you'd have to sign for it. I call her up a week later and I said, hi, I'm John Strelecky. And she was like, who? Like she did not even remember who I was. And so she said, yeah, I don't think it got here. And I knew it had gotten there because of the way I sent it. And I was like, okay, I have a lot to learn about this industry. And so I just chalked it up as like, this isn't going to work out. Sandie, 3 days later, I get a phone call. It's this lady, the editor of the magazine. She says, we need to meet. I was like, all right, well, that sounds very promising. And so we meet at this restaurant. I don't know this person at all. I've never met her, never even seen her. She's never met me. I sit down at the table and her opening words to me are, your book has changed my life. And this is what I mean by sometimes you're invited to the party that the universe thinks you're potentially ready for. And then you will get clues along the way to indicate that, yes, I know you don't know what you're doing, but it's okay. We're here to help you along the way. And this was one of the biggest, like, you're moving in the right direction moments that I could ever have imagined, because it was so weird and so an example of I was clueless and it didn't matter because the universe had my back. And yeah, it was transformative in the way that it happened.
You know, you are a living example of what I tell my clients, because I help people get their books, out there. And, your story is so inspiring for them. Everybody, I believe, has a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And most people think, oh, nobody's going to read it. It's not important. Other people have told similar stories. But no, I mean, this is an amazing experience. What did you think? What did you feel when it really started to take off?
I mean, like I said, luckily I was in that beautiful place of having backpacked around the world and trusted my intuition. And when you're an adventure traveler and you're backpacking around the world, the only thing you own are the things that can fit in your backpack. It's literally what goes from, your butt to your head. It's like it's a relatively small pack. And so you learned that it's not about what I have. It's not about stuff, at least for an adventurer like me. It's about experiences, and it's about logging the currency in life that really matters, which is minutes. And up until that point in my life, it had all been about planning for retirement, trying to save as much as possible. I was very busy doing what we talked about before. I was trying to run away from the things that I didn't like as opposed to running towards what I did. But backpacking around the world was different. That was me running towards what I did want to do. And so I think I was just in this unbelievably open space of like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I'll just go with the flow. It seems to be working out. And don't get me wrong, there's moments in your author career which set you back. Signing a bad contract will set you back. Or my very first 1-star review. I had gotten all these beautiful reviews, and then all of a sudden a 1-star review, and it was so toxic and so hateful. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, I was just trying to be part of something which is helping people, and then I did something. I went in and I looked up on Amazon. I looked up Mitch Albom's book, Tuesdays with Maury, which easily could have made my list 100%, by the way. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he's got 1-star reviews. And then I pulled up Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist. He's got 1-star reviews. Every single book that I looked up had like 3 to 5% 1-star reviews. And I was like, wow, how about that? Like some of the greatest writing that I've ever read in my life, there's still a certain percentage of the population that can't stand it for some reason. And what I learned is when someone writes something like that, they're unhappy in their life. And in all likelihood, something that you wrote actually touched a nerve. Like it could be a defining moment for them if they let it, but you have no control over that. And so what I told myself in that moment was, if I'm going to allocate any energy to reviews that people make, I have to allocate every bit as much energy first to the 5-star reviews, to the people who love what you do, before you allocate a second worth of energy to the 1-star reviews. And that has been transformative for me also, because no matter what you do, no matter how good you do it, no matter how good your intentions, there's always going to be a certain percentage of people that don't like what you do. And it has nothing to do with you. It's all about them and their story and where they're at in their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I would tell your clients, Sandie, if I was to give one piece of advice, which is don't go to the London Book Fair. Don't go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. Don't go to BEA, because you walk around these places. This is giant, massive hall with literally 500,000 titles. And you think to yourself, how in the world is anyone going to find my little 7 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch book? But for everyone who has become a bestseller, we all had the moment where not a single person had ever read our book, and it all worked out okay. So yeah, don't let yourself get intimidated by that. Do it anyway. Follow Sandie's advice.
Absolutely. So when you're not writing, speaking, doing whatever you're doing, you spend a lot of time still backpacking around the world. You've gone to so many places: Africa, the Amazon basin, Yucatan Peninsula, South America, Southeast Asia, Europe and China. What's left on your itinerary?
Honestly, I think you need about 10 lifetimes to cover it all. Because even going to a country, I'll go there. I spent 3 months the first time I was in South Africa, and I felt I only covered about 70% of it. And then crazy enough, it's changing just like you're changing. And so Greece in 2004 is not Greece now. And so, yeah, you'd need 10 lifetimes to cover it all. But I do love the places that are off the beaten path. Heading to a country, like I did a stretch where it was Albania, Macedonia, and Kosovo, which are not 3 countries most people will travel to. So the people were so amazing. The history, the culture is so rich, and I knew nothing about it. Like, it's nothing that I'd ever read in history books. It's nothing that I'd ever read stories about, and it's so unique and special, and the food was outstanding. So I like to go to places that I don't know anything about and just jump into the adventure.
So my question to you is, you probably know this, Steve Jobs famously gave a copy of Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi to every attendee at his memorial service. What book would you give to the people who attend yours?
Can it only be one book?
Tell me the titles.
Well, I would give a copy of mine just as a thank you to everybody there, and as like that would be the last piece of my legacy. So I would do that as a thank you to the universe for what it gave me. And then if I was to give just one book that was sort of intuitively, so a friend of mine wrote the book Hello from Heaven, and he was very instrumental in helping me in my adventure as a writer. And so it's a nice book to give at a funeral, because at a funeral you're feeling like this is sad. This person is gone, and I'm never going to see them again, and I'll never interact with them again. And that book contains thousands and thousands of examples that show that there is actually life after death, that the spirit exists far beyond the physical form. And so I suppose that book would do a great job of giving people some solace in the realization that although John Strelecky is gone, the physical him, the carrier of him, that he's not gone. Like, you can tap into him anytime you want to, just by thinking about him or asking him questions, and you'll get responses back. And so hopefully that would give people some degree of comfort in a moment of loss.
I think that's a really appropriate book to give people. We've had all kinds of, suggestions from different people. Nobody has given a book like that.
Well, you can owe that to Bill Guggenheim. That's what he gave at his funeral. He was the one who wrote it, and he left it for each of us that attended his celebration of life. Yeah. And it was funny because I already owned the book, and I had known him for years and years. And so then it brought in a very beautiful question, which is, who's a good person to give this to? Who is maybe struggling with this same situation in their life because they've got someone who they've lost? And so, yeah, a good book, very good book.
We've got a couple of minutes. Tell me about the cosmic algorithm. It feels like something that people need to hear about.
Yeah, so this is, again, a very big aha experience that has been transformative both for me and when I've been sharing it with others. We have in our daily life now an example of this in that you can jump onto Google or some other search engine and you can type in something. So let's say that you typed in purple polka dot cows, for example, into Google, and you typed that in 50 times over the course of 3 days. That at some point the algorithm starts to go, oh, wow. Sandie and John are incredibly fascinated by purple polka dot cows. We don't know why, but they certainly are fascinated by that. Therefore, even independent of them typing it in again, their past behavior would indicate a pattern. And so we will start to give them stuff related to their topic of interest. So you'll get articles, you'll get YouTube videos, you'll get places to go to see purple polka dot cows, you'll get little miniatures about this because the algorithm is looking at your behavior and then bringing more of that to life. And the cosmic algorithm that I've discovered is very powerful and it works in a very similar way. And so it's one thing to think to ourselves, oh, I wish my life was different. But far more important is to be demonstrating to the universe that you'd like your life to be different. Because if you think to yourself, oh, I really hate my job and my boss is a complete jerk, but we are creatures of free will in the eyes of the universe. And if every single day, Monday through Friday, I go sit at this desk and I allow myself to suffer at the job that I don't like with the boss who is a jerk, then the algorithm, the universal presence goes, I don't say I understand it because they are a creature of free will and they could literally do anything, but they keep going there and sitting in that desk chair that makes their back hurt and they're late to their kids' baseball games and they don't seem happy there, but they keep doing it. So they must love it because they're a creature of free will and they can do anything. And therefore, I, as a universal presence of love them. And since they're demonstrating they love this so much, I will give them more of that. And so this is the huge aha, that we are the co-creators in the reality that we are existing in. And it is in part because of the cosmic algorithm. So if you start changing the inputs, you start changing the outputs. And what's amazing about this is that, again, the algorithm is infinitely powerful. So whatever you would like to do, see or experience, it is very much within the grasp of the algorithm to do that. And the way in which it manifests can occur instantaneous. And I'll give you one specific example of this. So I'm on my backpacking trip around the world and get a message that says, hey, a friend is getting married in Italy. I am currently in South Africa at the time. And I'm in China at the time, heading towards South Africa. And this wedding is going to take place in Italy while I'm in South Africa. And so I'm at a little internet cafe. That's how I'm getting my message. And so I get on and look just out of curiosity to see if there are flights and what they would cost to go from South Africa up to Italy. And I'm not kidding. This is an entirely true story, Sandie. So I get on there and up pops a round trip ticket from Johannesburg, South Africa to Rome, $11. $11, right? And I'm like, this can't be real. But like I said, when you're in that space of trusting and your intuition, I'm like, book it. So I booked the ticket. Now, again, this is going back in 2002. And at that time, they would only ship your airline tickets to wherever the address was that your credit card was. And so I literally contacted my brother-in-law. I'm like, hey, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but if airline tickets show up, I need you to FedEx them to me in South Africa. Sandie, it cost me $75 to have my $11 airline tickets FedEx to South Africa. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get to the airport. They're going to take one look at this and be like, this is not a real ticket, But quite the contrary. I get there. I walk up to the gate. I hand them my ticket. I walk on this beautiful Air France 747, fly to Italy, have an amazing 10 days in Italy at the wedding, fly back to South Africa, continue my South African adventures. Now, how does that happen? Why does that happen? I can't tell you exactly the mechanisms in place other than the cosmic algorithm of the universe. To do something like that is nothing. It's nothing. And so when you're open to these possibilities, and I think it was because I was in the midst of this great big adventure, which as we've talked about from the beginning, that's who I am at my core. That's when these things happen frequently. And that's when they happen on a scale that is unimaginable compared to our everyday lives. And so, yeah, the cosmic algorithm is one of the greatest tools. And if you allow yourself to tap into it, your life can shift radically in beautiful directions.
We hear so much about synchronicities, coincidences, you name it. Anyone, and this is everyone, who owns a cell phone knows exactly what you're talking about. And to call it a cosmic algorithm, I think is brilliant, because you've just given the whole world the perfect analogy for this, that, there isn't a single person who wouldn't understand that.
That's awesome. Well, it's been, like I said, I'm fascinated by what's the underlying reality and how do we use that, use the systems and use the energies in a way that enables us to live an extraordinary life. Because I do believe that is the purpose of the human experience. For sure, we're here to learn. For sure, we're here to grow. But I do believe we're supposed to do it in a way that's fun. And so understanding the algorithm and how that impacts our ability to have fun and to fulfill our purpose is a very big and powerful piece of the whole puzzle. And like I said, I think the goal is to understand it so that you can use it in the human experience without getting so entranced by it. You're like, oh, I need to know every single way in which it works. That's part of it, but it's more just about using it.
Brilliant. John Strelecky, thank you for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Well, thank you, my friend. Like I said, I love the concept. I've enjoyed every single interview I listened to because I learned so much about the person as well as the books. So thanks for adding your genius to the world.
Thank you. John's 10 choices remind us that books aren't just words on a page. They're companions, teachers, and catalysts. They nudge us to laugh, to question, to wonder, and sometimes to start an entirely new chapter in our lives. So consider this. If your life were measured by the books that left their mark on you, which ones would be on your list, and what would they say about the path you're currently walking? For more information about John Strelecky's books, articles, podcasts, and events, visit johnstrelecky.com, where you can also sign up for his newsletter, The Meaningful Minute. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to John Strelecky.
Thanks, Sandie.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.